Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Nasser, and this is the Azure Cleveland User Group. A little bit about the group. We meet every second week of the month. The meetings are free of charge and open to the public, and we cover a variety of topics related to Azure. You can find all the meeting information posted at meetup.com at the link listed at the bottom of the slide. As always, big thank you to our sponsors, the .NET Foundation for sponsoring the Meetup website, and NIS Technologies for sponsoring the virtual meeting space. Some general information, if you're joining us for the first time, please keep in mind participation is always encouraged. And like I always say, the only stupid question is the one not being asked. So always jump in with a question or a comment. However, when not speaking, kindly ask you to mute your microphones just to avoid any background noise. Generally speaking, we want to keep it casual but organized, meaning feel free to chime in with a comment or a question. However, we want to give our speaker enough time to go through the slides and the demos. Lastly, the presentation is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube shortly after the editing process. So for tonight's feature presentation, we have Tim Rayburn discussing Intro to MCP Servers. Tim is the Vice President of Consulting for Improving Enterprises based out of Dallas, Texas. He is an 11-time Microsoft MVP. In addition, he's also a conference organizer, an author, and a user group speaker. And as you may have heard before we started the meeting, he's also a barbecue connoisseur, just like yours truly. And so with that, Tim, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody, for coming and taking some time to learn tonight. I know that the people who attend user groups, you are the folks who are recognizing that continuing to learn and grow your skills is a critical portion of being active in this industry. And that's been true for the decades that I've been speaking at this point, but I don't know if it's been more true than right now, right? We're in a time where the industry is for sure going through a massive change and growth spurt, and we all have new tools and new ways of working that we're going to have to develop and understand in order to continue to be successful long term inside of the industry. And one of those is AI. Obviously, it's the topic du jour on everybody's tongues these days. 5 out of 10 conversations in the world end up devolving into a conversation about AI these days. Okay. And today we're going to be talking about MCP servers and understanding how they serve as the toolbox to your artificial intelligence assistants. As Sam mentioned, this is a little bit about me. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm an open source maintainer. Every year, I feed over 200 people for July 4th at the Improving offices here in Dallas. If you're ever in town for July 4th, feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to give you an invite to this. I am a soccer fan. I used to own a game store. I'm an avid Magic the Gathering fan, which is more relevant to this presentation than you're going to think it is. And then, I am D&D podcaster. I'm a drone pilot. The specialization is for insects, as it's so to speak. It is a Heinlein quote in that I try to live that nerd's nerd life of just go and enjoy all of the things. I work very hard so that I can employ my hobbies very hard. And so this is a little bit about me. So the question I have for everybody to think about as we start this is, where are you today on the journey of AI maturity and growth as we start looking at this adoption curve? Today you might be at, I don't really have any AI that I'm using. I'm down here at the far left-hand side of this slide. You could be like, I use off-the-shelf technologies, so I'm using ChatGPT in the browser. I'm using Gemini in the browser. I'm using Claude to chat about my code and do auto completes inside of Visual Studio Code or Claude Code or the like. And then we start the transition up to when you leave the pure off the shelf. Now you start asking, have you begun to define for yourself the agents that will guide the tasks that you do in your day-to-day life, right? That come in and help and perform key functions for you. This could take the form of every morning at 8 a.m. getting a, here's your day planned out. I've looked at your calendar. I've figured out the meetings you have. I've given you meeting notes and talking points for all those meetings, and it's prepared in an email for you every morning. Or, it's taking the further step up to level 4 and not just looking at your workflow, but our workflow, and really getting to the point where you're starting to be inside of an organization that is transforming and getting to the point where the exact output that is needed as input to a development process is being produced by agents out of the product side of the organization to be able to drive features and development. I think most likely, if you're in this call, or you're viewing this video, you probably live somewhere in that 1 through 4 range of things today. There are very few people operating at the level 5, level 6, level 7, or level 8. And that's okay, right? This is a learning journey for all of us, and we're going to go. And the trust you have to have in your AI as you begin to shift just from a process level work all the way into that agentic operations, and we start handing not only the work, but the governance and oversight of that work to particular agents, is definitely something that's going to be a challenge for a lot of organizations as we go forward. Now, down at level 3 and 4, even at level 3 and 4, the big challenge tends to be, how do I get up this ladder? How do I begin to develop these skills, and how do I get access to the data I need? And that's a lot of what the MCP talk today is going to be talking about. But regardless of where you're at, I think the challenge in front of you is to begin to think about this space and begin to go on this journey. This talk somewhat assumes that you're today at a level 2 and that you're looking at shifting towards a level 3 more and more, and understanding how to equip an AI for your purposes because of that. So let's talk then about, where does the AI belong in our enterprises and our companies? How should we be using it? How should we be using it in our day-to-day? The first thing I like to do is just to level set, because from time to time I have been labeled as an AI fanboy or the equivalent. Let's talk about where does AI belong from the concept of every day you have a lot of work to do, but some percentage of that, some small percentage most likely, is addressable by the AI. The AI can vastly accelerate this. In a study that was done by Harvard and BCG, we saw that when AI is applied to very well-targeted tasks that it's well suited for, you see up to a 40% increase in speed from even novice users who are using it for the first time to accomplish those tasks. This is not yet a refined process where everybody's got a full understanding of exactly what the best way to do this is. They were put into new scenarios, asked to do this, and they saw that significant gain. So that's the good news. And so when we apply it to these tasks, we get compression. And the whole benefit of compression, the whole reason why that excites us, is because of the fact that we're gaining this time back, right? What do we use this time for? And then after we've been through that process, the real question is, then we go, well, are there other things that I could apply it to that I didn't think of the first go? And it winds up that the big thing that makes something compressible in the world of AI, the big thing that allows an AI to truly take on a task, is making sure that we can provide the AI the full context of the problem we're trying to solve. Too many of our systems today hide data in situations where it is beyond the scope and reach of AI. And so the limit of our compression is really the limit of how much context we can give the AI access to, which means that if I can get better context, I can get better compression, and then I get more wins because of that. So the reality is that on this chart, we start seeing that the context, and the more context I give things, which is represented by the size of our context down on the x-axis, as I provide more, I get better quality results out the top end. So my result quality starts going up and up and up and up as we go through. And everybody who's worked with AI has experienced this. They've most likely come up and worked with the tool and given it more context and more context and more context. And you're like, this thing is amazing. It understands the exact problem I'm trying to do with all the complexity and all the nuance. And then all of a sudden, it's like, wait, what just happened? And it falls off a cliff, and the quality suddenly starts to ridiculously decline. And you're like, what just happened here? Why did you, a minute ago, you were super smart, and now you're absurdly stupid, and you've forgotten lots of things I told you, etc. Well, this happens because of the fact that every AI model in the world has what is called a context window, a maximum amount of size that its context can be, because it keeps it all in memory and accessible to the probabilistic engines that drive AI. And when you exceed the context window, it compresses and throws away old data that it doesn't think it needs anymore in order to make it so that it can continue to have a conversation with you. Well, when it does that, it forgot things. It might have forgotten things that you haven't talked about in over an hour, but that are also absolutely critical guideposts to the work that you're building to. That experience results in significant negative results here. We wind up in this situation of like, I gave it lots of things, and all of a sudden it became remarkably stupid, and we don't understand why. So we want to avoid that as much as we can, right? Now, we also need to be able to lean into the front end of that curve and to make it so that we can provide as much context as possible to AI, so that we can give it access to new data, new things, that we can get better compression. So the challenges are, of course, like, how do I integrate into an AI, right? There's no like, oh, there's an easy point that I just plug in right here, and suddenly, I can call in directly to the AI and start, being involved in its neural decision paths and things like that. There have been all sorts of things that have been tried, from fully trained custom models to the RAG architectures, retrieval augmented graphs, right, to custom connections by data source. Lots of things tried, but the problem is we needed a standard interface. For this to grow and scale, the industry needed a standard way to accomplish this. And that is where our friends Anthropic stepped in, the folks who make Claude, and they were like, we have a pattern for this that we've been using that we would like to gift out to the community as a whole, and it was called the Model Context Protocol. And its benefit is it becomes the de facto standard. It becomes the SOAP or REST of the AI world, an ability to allow us to have a unified way to engage with providing data and context into an AI from external systems in a way that does not require us to pass everything in, and as such blow out the context window and make our AIs super stupid. It needed to have the concept of a client server architecture because of, for no other reason than most of the models are in the cloud, and we need a way to access enterprise data that is almost always behind a firewall. So that client really needs to live in a situation where it has access to a local network, even if the model itself doesn't, right? And then, we just needed a standard way to define the tools that we would provide to the AI, so that we can say, you have a tool, it does this, it accesses this data, or it provides you this ability, and here's how you can call it. And so we're about to go into a discussion about how to actually build this, but I want to sort of peel back and normalize terms, because the AI space is filled with way too many specific terms and specific product names and things like that, right? So I don't care if your day-to-day as a software developer is in Visual Studio Code or full Visual Studio or IntelliJ or JetBrains Writer. all of those for our purposes here today are going to be MCP clients, okay? And those in turn use large language models. That might be Sonnet, GPT-5, Gemini. All of those are we're simply going to refer to as models, okay? It also, by the way, doesn't matter if you're using a CLI version of this, a Cursor CLI, a Gemini CLI, a Copilot CLI. Those are all still MCP clients, just like Visual Studio Code is. And they, again, use these models that we're talking about. So for our purposes here, we wind up with this concept that we have an agent that is our MCP client, and it accesses a model. This is where we begin this journey. This being an MCP client means that when you call a model, you provided a list of tools. So we wind up in a world where when an agent calls into a model, it says, hey, please be aware that I have these tools available for you. And the model considers those tools, plans and reasons whether or not it wants to use those tools or just respond to the prompt in front of it. And if it decides to use a tool, it returns back to the agent and says, agent, please invoke this tool with these parameters. So it shifts that calling back over to the agent. And it is the MCP client that calls the MCP server. It is not the model. The model was told about the servers, but has no direct access to them. It reasoned about them, but did not call them directly. It returned back to the person calling it, which was the MCP client, in order to then have the client call the tools in question. This is perhaps the most misunderstood portion about MCP. People think that we're allowing the model to take action directly against our local systems, that the model is calling the MCP server. And the model is making the choice that an MCP server will be invoked, but it is not actually performing the call itself. That is very importantly coming from your MCP client environment, which is a process running on your box with your credentials that can take actions in your local network. So, big concept here, big important division about where these lines break up. So I want to pause just for a second and go, does anybody have any questions about that? Because if you have questions here, if I just press forward, we're likely to hit some challenges. Audine, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, I had a unmute challenge there.
No worries.
So, real quick, does that mean that it is more secure in that, say, all of your documentation and maybe not your secrets, but if you had old, VB6 or old legacy connection strings and code and whatever that you wanted to, if I'm understanding correctly, put as context up in your MCP server, then because the model's not calling it directly and it's deciding, oh, I'm going to use that document that has all of this proprietary or confidential information, then it tells the agent and the agent uses that. So that's more secure. Did I understand it correctly or no?
Unfortunately, no. And let me explain why. Okay. And so
because I'm still in Claude Code, my regular daily, like step 1 or 2, you said.
Right.
Not so one, I'm doing something. So two or 3.
So Claude Code can act as an MCP client, right? And so let's say that you had a database locally or something like a payroll system or a financial system or a business system of some sort that you wanted to be able to ask the model to solve problems with. Like, let's say you're just trying to organize inbound transactions to a environment for accounting. Okay. You could say, hey, model, request to the model, I would like you to organize the last 30 days worth of transactions in my bookkeeping system to make sure that they're all accounted to the appropriate accounts. You send that prompt and you tell it, by the way, one of the things I have available for you is a tool that will let you get information from the accounting system, such as the transactions that have not been properly accounted for yet. And the model will consider the prompt, consider the tools it has available, and then send back a response to the agent saying, I think I'm going to need the last 30 days of transactions, and it will do that by telling the model, please invoke the MCP server that gives you access to that data, hand it the parameters that including the number of days since I did this of 30 days. The MCP server will gather up that data, return it to the agent, and the agent will in turn hand it to the model. And by doing that, it has now left your enterprise. So we took data that was neatly tucked behind your walls and safe, and have now sent it up to the model.
Okay.
Now we didn't send multiple years worth of data. We didn't send it absolutely everything from your accounting system, but we did send that data outside. Now, you should never be doing almost anything with AI in the modern world without doing it on a paid account where somebody has given you the ability to say, don't learn from my data, don't train on my data.
Yeah,
don't
train on my data.
This.
Yeah.
And that's a very common practice these days.
Right.
So, if you take that out of it, this could just as easily be an exchange between you pulling a report out of the payroll system or the accounting system, pulling it into Outlook and sending it to somebody else via a mail server in the cloud, right? That's the same. We take that risk every day with vendors we trust, right?
Right.
Now, the AI companies have some amount of answering for the fact that they took a lot of liberties with data privacy to get where they are today, right? And so they have people who are skeptical about them, and reasonably so. But yeah, it does not actually make your data more secure. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much for clarifying that. A great presentation so far. Thank you.
Thank you. So this concept of the model. So let me pause. Any more questions while we're here? That was a great question, Audine. Thank you for that.
Yeah, there's a question in chat from Dimitri asking, does the model provide context?
The model does not provide context in and of itself. The model is provided context. Okay. Now that is both a true thing that I said and an important thing to remember that I quasi-lied, because of the fact that we have all seen, please provide me 7 user stories for a task tracking application turn into a long list of user stories built out with all these details. That's context to a human. It's just the generated output to the AI, though, right? Those things are not its own context. It is the return thing. Now, once it's generated for you, though, it will remember that. And so it is in context at that point. Anything it generates will be remembered, and that's why it's part of context window. So, but it is all generated output. It is not source of truth, right? Like generally things that the model is creating are those probabilistic outcomes that we should take with that grain of salt. They're not actual data that came out of an enterprise system that we can treat as the source of truth, because that's what it is when we go get data from our accounting system.
Okay, thank you. Audine, you still have your hand up. Do you have an additional question? Probably looking.
No, I'm having all the challenges tonight. I'm sorry. Let me lower my hand. I apologize.
It's all good. No worries. All right.
All right. So I'll proceed forward then. So my goal now is to tell you a little bit about an actual MCP server. But before I do that, I have to tell you about the fact that, like I mentioned in my bio slide, I'm a Magic the Gathering nerd. So let's show you some things here. I play a game called Magic the Gathering. It is a trading card game. It has existed for over 30 years. It has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cards that are out there and available to engage with and play the game. And so, not surprisingly, some most likely nerd that played the game, such as myself, though it was not me,
decided to make a website that tracked and had a database of every card that has ever existed. So you can come in here to this website that's called scryfall.com, and you can do things like search for the phrase Leonardo. And you will see that there is Leonardo the Ninja Turtle a couple of times. There's actually many times here. There's Leonardo da Vinci. There's Leonardo the Sewer Samurai and the Worldly Warrior, etc. Okay, so we have a lot of cards, and if I were to click on any of these cards, I can get their details about all the game terms and specifics and the current pricing for the collectible cards. And yes, I'm here to tell you that there is a version of this card that costs over $215. Welcome to collectibles. Okay. I bring this up because of the fact that this, like I said, this was a website written by a bunch of nerds. And so they have an entire syntax structure of how to query for these things. So you can come in here and choose cards by color and card type and power and toughness, and every single statistic about this card can be used to craft a query in a language a syntactic language they created for this website that allows them to go do this. The syntactic language is so complex and robust that if you actually come down here, they support regular expressions for performing actions against the card names and the card values. So this is an absurdly nerdy, highly technical way of being able to search this database. They support and or operators, nesting conditions, parentheses, all the wonderful things you could possibly ever want if you to nerd out to your heart's desire. And because of the fact that somebody wrote this website, and because of the fact that AI exists, of course, it naturally followed, like day follows night, that someone decided to write an MCP server that allows AIs to interact with and query cards from the Scryfall database into an AI environment. It is, not surprisingly, called Scryfall MCP, okay? And down here, they describe, being able to do a search of like, what's the name and price of a blue 1/1 from Revise that is tap and deal 1 damage to any target, and it comes back and figures out that that is a particular card that is called Prodigal Sorcerer. And so it's very interesting for a couple of reasons. I use this as an example, not just because I'm a magic nerd, but also because of the fact that it has exactly 7 tools it provides. It teaches an AI how to search for cards, get a card by its ID, get a card by its name, pull a random card, get rulings about a card, get prices by an ID, and get prices by name. That's all this MCP server will do for them. And there are multiple ways that you can use this, but the easiest way to integrate it into your local environment is to simply run one of these 2 commands, and we're going to use the MPX version of it here, that will go into your environment's MCP configs. Now, let's talk about environments and MCP configs. When I am working, I generally now use as my agentic development environment of choice a product called Windsurf. Nothing I'm about to show you here is specific to Windsurf. You can do all of this in Visual Studio Code or in Cursor or in Claude Code. All of them have this ability. You just have to look up how they allow you to add MCP servers. And when I say look up, what I mean is that you should probably just come over here, open up the window on the side and go, how do I add an MCP server to Windsurf? ? And it will then go look that up and come back with an answer about how you do that. As it is thinking through that and handing that off to GPT Codex right now, apparently. It will give me this list of answers, but it's like open Windsurf and then open the MCP config, which if I come up here and do the command to do things, I can in fact see that there's an MCP marketplace and there are lots of MCP servers available here. And then this little gear actually gets me to the configuration for the MCPs in this environment. I have one tool already installed, which is this MCP Playwright. We'll come back to that here in a moment. But for right now, I'm just going to come in and stick in a comma into this thing and paste in the JSON that I got out of that website. And then I'm going to go ahead and, for my sanity and everybody else's, I'm going to format that document so that everything's nice, neat, and properly indented. So this says, Scryfall, please use NPX to run the Scryfall MCP server. This means that NPX tells you, I'm going to run this. It's a Node application. I'm going to run it on my local box, and it is going to be running as a Node app, except I'm never going to see it because it's just going to run in the background. And you can see this by saving that file here in Windsurf. I now see that I have Scryfall. It's a custom MCP server. It is enabled, and that it has 7 tools available for my environment. Those 7 tools, just to harken back, are literally the 7 tools we talked about up here. They are these 7 features. Okay. So we learned out a little while ago when we were hitting the Scryfall website that there are multiple cards with the name Leonardo, right? So I should be able to come in, and I'm actually going to move to Claude Sonnet 4.5 just for speed and preference here. And I'm going to ask it, use the Scryfall MCP to list all cards that have Leonardo in their name. And this is going to go, you're going to see it invoke that search cards method, and it's going to go cards with Leonardo in its name. I have found 8 of them, and it's going to list them out here, right, as a listing out of the 4 cards from the standard turtle set and the other ones here that it found. And this all makes sense and lines up with the results that we got from the actual website when we searched for the phrase Leonardo. We also got 8 results. Now, if I'm absolutely paying attention, I would note that the list that it has given me here does not include Leonardo da Vinci, because it has wound up double counting a card at some point to get to the fact that it didn't hit that one, but that's okay. It is like all things AI, prone to occasionally making a yep, that's a mistake, but nonetheless it's done that, right? I could also come in here and say, go ahead and get me a random card. And when I do that, it will say, no problem, let me pull a random card, and it will pull up a card named Windsail that was originally produced as part of the Portal Second Age set back in 1998 and is currently worth 16 cents. So we have here a real ability to show that I have connected this AI to a data set that is going on online. And about now, you're probably thinking like, okay, Tim, that's really clever and that's really powerful, I suppose, but it's gotta be an absurd amount of code to get this all done. And this is where I smile. I come back to our GitHub repository here for the Scryfall MCP server and said, well, what if I told you that the entirety of this MCP server was soup to nuts, every bit of code done in just over 500 lines of code? At the end of the day, this is TypeScript. It has absolutely everything in this one file called index.ts, other than the libraries it's using from Anthropic to do an MCP and from Node and Express to be able to do web interactions. But it has listed here the various tools that it has available. And if we look over here on the side where the helper from GitHub has told us, we have a variety of methods available to us. One of those methods is handling the search cards, okay? And this is the really mind-blowing thing. When we get down to actually what happens when we say, when we reach the point of go perform this search, all that it does is build a URL that it takes the query that was provided to it as a string, query encodes that into the string as q equals the value, and then it just fetches that URL and sends back the response. There is no magic here. There's no complexity here. This is literally a single fetch call to be able to do a search by a card's name. Now, you might reasonably ask, wait, but how did it know what to put in this query and the like? And that's where the most interesting thing about MCPs is that the important part is very rarely the actual implementation. I mean, you have to do the implementation, but the most important part of an MCP is actually when you crack it open and you look at the description, the metadata that we know about this tool. So this is the search card tools tool that we have defined, and it has a name called search cards, no great surprise there. But then it has a description. This is just a textual description of what search card does. And so it comes back and it says this search for an MTG card by a text query. Example, Oracle text includes draw cards, and returns a list of matching cards with basic fields, name, set, collector number, ID. If no matches are found, it returns an error message from Scryfall. And this description is actually the portion that the AI model engages with the most. This is what it reads when it gets the tools list sent in. It looks at this description and goes, will this help me answer the user's query? And if it decides the answer to that is yes, it will, then it will send back to the MCP client, please invoke this tool. Please invoke the search cards tool so that I can go get the data. And then it will fill out the input schema here. And this input schema describes the data that you need to provide the tool you want to call. And in this case, it says, give me an object. It has one property called query. That property is a string. The description on that string is a full text query, example, tgoblin pow equals 2, o : haste. You didn't need to know what that means for the current time. It's not relevant to our talk. And then it comes back and says, by the way, required on this object is that you must pass query. Well, that's good because literally query is the only thing we're asking for. It's just one parameter for this that we're asking it to pass. And so the AI reads the description, decides it's going to invoke the tool, reads the schema, and builds the calling object. In this case, it builds out a query parametered property that says, this is the query I want you to perform, and it sends that back to the MCP client. The MCP client then takes that tool call and sends it to the MCP server for it to go execute. That's where our TypeScript would get invoked. We'll wind up making that HTTP call to Scryfall at that point. We'll get the results, and we'll send them back to the MCP client, who will send it back to the model. That dance between model makes a choice, the client invokes the MCP server. The MCP server does whatever it's going to do to acquire data, and it all flows back. So I'll pause there. There's a lot to digest there, but really there's not a lot of complexity. But who has questions about this process, about how an AI has selected a tool or how it has chosen to fill out the parameters?
I think we're good. I don't see any questions in chat and no hands raised.
All right. So just to come back, looking at our previous interactions here that we had with AI, you can see that it said, I made an MCP tool call to Scryfall search cards. If we actually click this thing and expand it, we can see in here that the MCP tool was passed query Leonardo. There is our object that our description requires that it pass us. So it was run with those arguments. And then the
next thing you see here is the output, what was returned from the call to Scryfall. And we see that in this case, we get an object that is a list with data and all sorts of parameters and information about each of these cards. And this will go for just those 8 cards. It will go a very long time with a significant amount of JSON data that was sent back, which it used to in turn craft this text response to me. And when I asked it later to then turn around and give me a random card, it said, hey, give me a random card. Oh, wait, here we go. Give me a random card. There's no input to random card. Random card is a function that doesn't take any input. And the Scryfall server just returns a card. And so it returned one big long data package about that one card. But when I was asking for something simple like give me cards with Leonardo in their name, that's easy enough to understand that it turned my request for cards with Leonardo in their name to a request for the Leonardo query string. Let's do something more complicated, shall we? Let's ask Scryfall for goblin creature cards with power 2 or more that are red and red only, that also have haste. Now, this is a magic nerdy thing. You don't have to understand the particulars in the game about why I'm asking this particular query, and it's going to go give me a response, and apparently there are 56 things here. The thing I want to dwell on now is to ask you the question of how exactly did my AI turn this text response into T-Goblin, T-Creature, CR, POW greater than or equal to 2O : haste. That is the correct syntax for the English sentence I gave it. But where along the line did I teach the AI how to perform that query? Anybody have an answer for me? Somebody jump in. Throw me a bone. Give me your best guess.
This is before it gets to the MCP, right? So it's not the Anthropic libraries that were pulled into the MCP that you showed, right? This is the local IDE taking your text and putting it into, or is this coming?
So this set of parameters is generated by the model. The model got got this information, this prompt I gave it up here, and it got all of the tool descriptions for search and card by ID, etc. It got all this data included, okay? But none of that taught it how to write. It had some examples of queries, right? But none of it taught it how to write the Scryfall syntax. So that's my question, is how did the model know how to write the Scryfall syntax?
So how does it know anything? I mean, it was trained on lots of data, right? That's all I know at this point.
Yep, you got it. You got it exactly. The answer is the model has been trained on basically the whole of human knowledge, and that includes the fact that Scryfall's been around for a long time, and it has an understanding of their query language buried into its model, okay? And so it knew how to do this because at some point in the past, the training data sets had wound up taking this Scryfall search reference page, and it had digested all of this data as learning data into the AI model. As utterly bizarre as that might seem to you, that is the reality, okay?
Yeah.
And so it knows how to do this the exact same way that it knows how to write SQL and C# and everything else that it knows.
Legacy stuff, yeah.
Exactly. And so this becomes it knew we didn't have to do it. But this is important because it means that if we're working with structures that are like or even kind of like structures that exist in the universe, right? You can create MCPs very quickly by just either saying or implying that they do certain things. For instance, if we wrote an MCP that let the AI query a Postgres or SQL Server database locally, all we would have to have is a tool called execute SQL that took a SQL command string instead of a query, or just a query, and then describe it as a string that contains a SQL query you would like executed against the server. And it would know from that, I can use that to execute anything I want in there that I can describe in SQL. And you might go, okay, that's useful, but SQL is only really useful if you understand the structure of the database, except for the fact that anybody who's played with databases long enough knows that there are info schemas and the like that can be queried. And so all of a sudden, you can have this situation where it's like, yep, I gave access to the ability to execute SQL against my database. Even if it doesn't know what my tables are named or the like, it can go execute a SQL statement to get a list of tables back and use that to craft another call that it will actually use to go get the data that we need. So it will think its way around the problem using the tools that you have given it. Josh, you have a question?
I do. In using the tools that you have given it, or when it's choosing the tools that you have given it, I understand the part that you had said about you give it the description and it uses that as a basis to determine what tools to use. If there are two similar tools, for example, say you had I'll just say like another Magic the Gathering deck tool defined that had a similar description, would the client be probabilistic in how it ascertained which one to use? And could that vary between queries, or would it be, does it pretty much grab one and keep using it for the rest of the session?
So it's it is going to be probabilistic. It is not the client, but it'll be the model that's being probabilistic about how it chooses which tool to use. Okay.
Fair. Sorry.
Yeah. And and I will say that with that being true, and there is a chance that it could switch between those tools. On the other hand, the choice it made, I chose to invoke the tool the first time, is part of its context window at that point, which means that if it needs another tool call, it is going to know, well, I made the choice to use tool A the first time. If I was happy with tool A's results, I should probably continue with tool A, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
If I'm making a different choice, I might choose to use the other one, right? So it can reason its way through that problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. So I use this as an example, not just because I'm a Magic nerd, but because it's small and approachable, and it's really just very, very, very simple TypeScript that makes all of this happen. And so, it is available by searching for Scryfall MCP out there. So I would encourage you, if you want a simple example of a good MCP server that will show you how this can be done, this is a really solid place to start because you won't get overwhelmed. But it is my favorite example of where to start out and help explain the internal guts of how that call back and forth goes. Now, when we start having standardized things, and we now get these reusable blocks, right? We get these ability to get to create tools that are reusable, and as you've already seen, that in turn creates into marketplaces and how we collaborate as a community, where we start coming together and we start sharing the best way to do things, the best structures. So it really gets us abilities far and beyond, even if you never write an MCP server. and never deploy one inside your enterprise that is custom for you. You should look at what's out there, because there are some amazingly powerful tools that have been written by the community at large to make things better for your developer environment. We're going to talk in a moment here about the Playwright MCP, which is the other MCP I have installed. Just to take a moment and glance down the list here, if you want to give your AI the ability to have a persistent memory, you could work with a memory MCP. If you work with Figma for designs, there's a way for your local models to, or for your AI to reach out to Figma and get all the details of the designs that have been created, so it can create more true to form code output from what was designed in the environment. GitHub themselves have a MCP server for being able to interact with the GitHub environment, and of course Atlassian does as well for working with Jira, Confluence, and the like. So there are so many interesting things out there that have abilities to do things, including an official linear one for linear boards, MongoDB, Vercel, Postman, you name it. There are literally hundreds of them out here. And so at this point, it's just a matter of choosing the right tools for what you're trying to bring in so that you can integrate that data in with your environment. I was talking with some folks who are on our mergers and acquisitions team, and they had commented on how one of their data providers had contacted them and let them know that they had a ability for the Claude desktop application, which can use MCP servers, by the way, to now reach out to their actual CRM database that they maintain for their business activity and be able to query that and bring data in. So very powerful things. Now, Playwright is one of the most popular ones you're going to see out here. And it's interesting because of the fact that most people are familiar with Playwright as a library for doing QA automation, where they automate being able to investigate and perform testing against browser-based applications. But when you give that same Playwright library, hooked up to an actual MCP server, now I get the ability to do some very clever things. So I can come in here and give a prompt to my environment here to say, open a browser using Playwright and navigate to the YouTube homepage. And I can ask it to do that, and in a moment, it's going to go, yep, sure, no problem. Here you go. This is YouTube, ready to go, which I'm not signed in, so there's no content here that it can serve up. But nonetheless, it opened a browser for me, and it was able to turn around and actually navigate that browser to youtube.com. All right. So we have an ability to open browsers and navigate browsers. Let's do something more complicated. Now go to improving.com and find all of the services they list and the employees they highlight for those services. Then return me a bulleted list of services with employees underneath them. And I'm going to press enter. And it's like, okay, let me think about how I do that. He goes, let me open a browser. Let's go to improving.com. And now we watch the loop in action. I gave it something that this page alone can't answer. So then it's like, hold on, let me click on services. Then I got the dynamic menu. And then it saw all those services. and it's reasoning on what it saw, and then it's going to decide to go click on one of them. And so it clicked on the services area in particular. And then in a moment, it will decide that this still isn't enough to fully answer, and it will move around to let me explore the development area, and it will navigate to development. And it will proceed to do this step by step, exploring the website, page by page, making decisions about what it's seeing there, the employees that it sees mentioned there, and turn that into actually exploring and doing things. Audine, question.
Okay, this is a real work example here, and I'm asking from your example that you've got here, where you're using Playwright and it's actually launching the browser and it's doing this analysis. I've been tasked with upgrading one of our websites, and I asked it to compare, and this is inside of Claude Code, compare other, like Shopify. I'm sure everybody's probably heard of that, and some other sites. It used Python and, command line stuff. How is that different in the sense that, did it get, in your opinion or in your experience, a less thorough is it able to see more by doing it this way that you're showing than
Yes.
That's okay, because
the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It sounds like it. Yeah, it seems like it with what you're showing. Yeah.
And the reason
I'm going to
why,
redo that with Playwright now.
Right. Yeah, the reason why is that when you do a drive around with Python, provided that Python wasn't just using the Playwright library and driving a browser itself, which it might have been, right? But assuming it wasn't, the difference is that this will actually get dynamically rendered data, right? Whereas if you just pull the 200, you won't get, if you don't run the JavaScript, you won't get the JavaScript. But the Chrome browser is going to run the JavaScript, right?
Yeah.
And so it's going to get a much more robust output out of this, right? To be able to see real data. And certainly Shopify sites are notorious for loading lots of things late and lazy, right?
Yes.
And so if you do a simplistic attack of trying to hit them, you're not going to get very much, okay? So this is, it went through all those things, went through the various sections, and it was like, great, for development, you have Scott McMichael. For training, you have all these fine folks, right? There's nobody for communicating community or managed services, right? But it did go find and organize and build me the exact structure that I wanted, right? And now, as if this weren't cool enough, and it is, right? If you are somebody who has ever been inclined towards QA automation, right? The fact that I could now come in and do something like this and say, what selector would I use to find Scott McMichael's name on that page? And it will come back, go back, hit the page that it saw Scott on, okay? And then perform that out and actually extract out the exact selector to use to accomplish that task, okay? So it's contemplating, it's like, let me search for the Scott McMichael to find the proper selector. And so it's doing some evaluation, and it's like, found it. If you wanted to do that with a CSS selector, right, then here is exactly how you would go about this. You could do it by page text looking for him, or if you're looking for by role, then you do a div with all of these wonderful things. And if I saw this in an actual test, I would probably go, that needs a data test ID on it, because I would never want to actually use that selector in real life. But the point is that it has not only the awareness of the actual page browser information, it has the full DOM behind it, it has the full script context behind it. It can
run JavaScript in a browser, like you could do the equivalent of opening DevTools and evaluate JavaScript in a moment. So if there's a way to like make a loaded Shopify page, in Audine's example, fess up the data feed from a client-side object that it has loaded, you could just say, oh, while you're there, go get this data out of the JavaScript object in the back, and it would do it, yank it out and load it into the model, and then it could take actions to store that to a file or do anything else. So these are the types of things that you can see MCPs do start enabling really powerful things. The other really powerful thing that this enables is that every example that Audine talked about, that I talked about here so far, has been hitting a public website, right? I hit improving.com. There's nothing stopping you from running Playwright against localhost 3000, right? And testing your actual local code that is not yet deployed anywhere but your box, and running end-to-end tests, or doing an examination of the rendered page to create an end-to-end test. Like, go use Playwright to explore localhost 3000, find the page that does this, and write me a new test for that, and it will. And it is absolutely amazing. When I teach classes to AI inside Improving, we do building a task tracking application as this, and I always have Playwright installed on my local environment, and very rarely do the students. So when I do demos, from time to time, my dev agent who's developing my task tracking application is like, let me do this, let me write tests, let me do all this other stuff. Now let me open a browser and see what actually happened. And they're like, what did your thing just do? And I'm like, it used Playwright because it was a tool and it was available on all those previous calls, but it was only at this point that it decided that that was useful to it, right? So that gives an example of actually using this in concrete practice. So
thank you. Yeah.
This is my sort of big finisher demo at the end, right? I tend to tell people, like, the real call to action here, right, is yes, go explore MCPs. Yes, spend some time trying to find out if there are MCPs like that would be useful to your day job. If you work on cutting edge modern stuff, by the way, if you don't know what Context 7 is, it's an MCP server that's available who specifically provides better access to help documentation for modern modern programming languages. So it's like, you know, if you're used to your AI hallucinating calls for React Native because it just assumes that there's a library method there that isn't, not with Context 7 plugged in, it'll just go do the lookup, get the documentation, and come back. So there are lots of things out there. But my big one is ask audacious questions. I think the number one thing that I blow people's minds with all the time with AI is that I was willing to ask it something truly audacious, that it was like, oh yeah, I can go do that. And everybody was always like, how? And I was like, I just asked. I didn't stop myself. I didn't think there's no way it could do that for me. I start from a position of abundance. I assume it can do anything and let it tell me when I've thought too much of it. And I think far too many people start the other way. And I would encourage you to stop putting AI in a box, ask it to do the truly crazy things, and then learn as it falls down on you from occasion when that happens to what you should and should not ask it. If anybody's got more questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, that is my presentation.
I really love the ending. You really nailed it when you said ask audacious questions. I couldn't agree more. But with that said, what would you say is the most audacious thing you've asked and it really surprised you?
So the most audacious thing I have asked that truly blew my mind was a Playwright example, right? I had it up. I had it Playwright doing navigation against a website I was developing. And then I was like, hey, this is my given when then acceptance criteria on the user story that I'm writing right now. Can you write me an automation test for that? And that was the first time I saw it launch, use Playwright to choose to navigate its own way through. It found the page that the given when then was relevant to, built all the context of the CSS selectors that it needed to, wrote the test for me. I was using Gherkin syntax for my tests. So it wrote my test, it wrote my page model, it wrote my step implementations that use the page model. And then when I was done, that was pretty cool to begin with. But I had one of those examples of the big ugly CSS selector that was like, oh, that's absurd. So all I had done with this model in this system was interact with the running website via Playwright. I went into my my test file that it had produced for me. I highlighted the CSS selector and went, can we introduce a data test ID to make this selector better? And it went, renavigated to the website, looked at the structure of the website, figured out which React component had been used to render that, went to the React side of my code base, found the React component on disk, injected the data test ID, waited for the hot reload, made sure it had come through, and then updated the test and went done. And I was just like, that just happened. Holy crud. Okay.
Heaven help us if it starts being
Yeah.
a robot that can kill all humans or something, right?
No, we are still so far away from artificial general intelligence. There's no worries, but this is definitely super cool. Ask it to do crazy things and let it guide you to success. But yeah, Sam, that's my crazy example.
Wow.
Very cool. Anyone else have any questions or comments? All right. Great presentation, Tim. Very well explained. Appreciate it. And if I may,
happy to be here. Sorry.
Thank you. If I may, I'd like to take back the screen just to share some concluding announcements. Okay, if you look over in the chat window, you'll see that I pasted 3 links. And specifically, those links are for, one, the YouTube channel. That's where the meeting is being, that's where the meeting will be posted. If you would please subscribe to the channel to get the upload notifications. Likewise, my blog, where I post various tech events that we'll discuss in just a second. And again, also please subscribe to that to get the updates. And last but certainly not least, the third link is a link to the feedback eval form. If you would please take a moment to fill that out so we can provide Tim with some constructive criticism. And if you're kind enough to do so, then you'll be in the drawing for the visual designer for cross-platform .NET apps from Uno. You'll get a free license for that in the email. So again, urge you to fill out the eval form. Regarding tech events within the region, so on March 19th is going to be the Greater Lansing User Group for .NET users, and that's going to be held online. And the link for that is posted on my blog. And then on March 25th will be the Cleveland C# User Group, and that link for that is also on the blog. In addition, February through June of this year, Microsoft is sponsoring Agent Camp. And what Agent Camp is, it is literally a worldwide event of various topics regarding AI and agents specifically. And you can see on the map that there are locations worldwide, and you can drill down specifically which ones are going to be in person or virtual. And they're free of charge, and some are hybrid, and some are virtual. Just depends on what city you're looking at and what date. But they span all the way from February all the way through June of this year. More specifically, the Memphis Agent Camp, that will be held on March 16th, which is this coming Monday. And as you can see, there are 4 different tracks relating to agents, AI, models, and everything artificial intelligence. And yours truly will be presenting at the end of the day on Build Your Own Copilot at 4 p.m. Again, this is free of charge, open to everyone. And the link is also posted on my blog as well.
And Sam, just as a quick note, at 10 a.m. in the Grok channel there, you will see that my talk is this exact talk is being re-given at that Agent Camp as well. So if anyone here has coworkers that should have been here and listening to this, right, that is a great chance to catch this presentation one more time. and hear that, or to go listen to the other fine speakers who are also speaking at that same time. Like Bill Wilder knows one or two things and is a pretty smart dude. Okay, so
He is, and thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate it. All right, moving right along. Next topic, jobs. So I always like to ask, who's hiring and who's looking for work? If you would please make yourself known in chat. Tim, is improving hiring currently?
we are. I was actually about to post that into chat, but we're looking for people who have some significant experience with AI-based development. But if that is you, then by all means, would love to have a conversation, because we're hiring nationwide, actually internationally, for people with that skill set at the current time.
Excellent, very good. Yeah, and I'll wait for the link for you to post in chat. And Damu beat you to it with the SQL Saturday event that's going to be happening on March 21st in the Atlanta area. This looks like it's all in person. I don't see anything virtual, but if you are in the Atlanta area, urge you to check that out. Now, regarding jobs, anyone else hiring or anyone else looking for work? And if not, devitjobs.com. There you can filter on the geo, whether you want to work in person or remotely, the type of technology you want to work with, full-time, part-time, contract. You can filter on a variety of different things. And again, the link for that is devitjobs.com. Last but not least, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to just jump in, since I didn't get it before you moved off to the SQL Saturday in Atlanta. I'm speaking there too, because apparently everybody's choosing all the events I'm speaking at. I'm both a pre-compiler on Friday, talking about agentic development and doing an all-day session there for them. Vibes aren't a strategy. And then I'm also speaking the following day on judgment and AI, and how to teach your organization how to appropriately trust AI. So
I'm scanning the schedule real quick. What time slot are you speaking?
I think I think I'm right after lunch is the plan. They slotted me into a previous. There it is. Yes, the 1:15 slot, third from the last, on the right-hand side. Yep. So the judgment gap. Yep.
Lastly, my contact information, if needed. My email is snasser@nistechnologies.com. You can also find all my socials on Linktree/Sam Nasser, and LinkedIn, my favorite platform. If we're not connected on that, please, let's do so. It's a great way to keep in touch, share events, share articles, and just overall stay in touch with the rest of the community. And so with that, let me check the chat for any last-minute questions. We have the link for the hiring at Improving, and that is improving.com/careers. So please take a moment to check that out. If there's no other questions or comments, thanks again to Tim. Thank you all for attending, and a special thanks for those who participated and made it a little bit more interactive. Audine specifically, and I think there was another gentleman that had jumped in. I don't recall the name.
Josh.
But thank
Josh.
you all for,
yep.
Yeah, thank you all for participating. And more importantly, look forward to seeing you all next month at the next meeting. And so with that, thanks everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you next month.